Welcome to the Lair of Secrets podcast, the podcast about gaming and being a geek by two 40-something geek dads. I'm David Moore, and I've been sailing in a boat, which is bumpier than a dirigible. And I've also been digging heavily into books pulled from several of the libraries here in the Lair.
And I'm Ken Newquist, and I am happily buried under many of those self-same books from the library in the Lair. So what you been up to?
Yeah, I was, speaking of sailing in a boat, that was the big thing. I think I mentioned it in the intro for the Philmont episode, but given the order of these, who knows when they're going to come out, getting things out of the Lair through that, time barrier is really difficult sometimes.
It's very wibbly wobbly. Very wibbly wobbly.
Very. So Erin and I, we got our ASA sailing training. We did that at Lake Monroe here in Indiana. We completed it. It was a lot of fun. The water was really super smooth because there was almost no wind. We got all the training on how to sail in very, very low wind. We did get up to about...
There was enough to actually do the training?
Yes, there was enough to do the training up until the docking portion, like coming into a pier or a dock and how to approach it. We were going to approach it and they were going to talk about like if it's blowing into the wind is blowing into the dock or wind's blowing away from the dock. We did all the different ways to do it, but we had to motor in order to do it. But yeah, we pulled up the mainsail, pulled up the jib. We sailed around a fair portion of Lake Monroe for several hours, and then it's a 2-day course. So that evening, we knew there's a paper test as part of the certification, and so we were reading the ASA 101. Book. Both of us were reading through it, and so to keep us, so we weren't just reading it in a silent hotel room. We turned on the TV, and on it, on one of the channels, I don't watch TV anymore. We watched 3 of the newer Deathrace movies. Which is...
That's fantastic.
Yes. What really surprised me is Erin actually really loved them too. Nearly 6 hours of Deathrace movies. So,
wow.
Actually, they're probably not a 2-hour movie. They're probably like 90 minutes. So probably 4.5 hours of movies. It was a lot of Deathrace. And the third one that I watched was a little weird because it was supposed to be a prequel to the original Deathrace with David Carradine, but like there's some plot holes in it. But it's a movie called Deathrace, and plot holes are okay. And so we watched it. And we studied for ASA 101. And we both scored in the upper 90s on the paper test. So Deathrace and studying goes hand in hand. So I highly recommend it for all college students out there.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that was a habit I had in high school. That was how I studied, right? Like I would put on like the first 3 Nightmare on Elm Street movies and study, and I was terrible. Like, so once I got to college, I learned that that's not how I should study. But I'm glad it worked for you guys.
Well, it works when there isn't a lot of thought that needs to be put into the movie. It's like what's happening now? Okay, cars are being blown up. Okay, let's read some more. It's not a real hard movie to watch in terms of. There's not a lot of nuance in the Deathrace movies, but they were fun. Like, I wouldn't be able to watch the new Mad Max and study because there's a lot of interpersonal stuff and character development and things like that. Not on these.
Yeah, and the new Mad Max, I mean, Fury Road is beautiful. Like, yes. It's just the cinematography of it is just fantastic, and like the whole like when they're racing past the burning tornadoes, right? Like it's just wow, you can't take your eyes off of it, right? Like I can see how it would be terrible for studying. But
Yes.
Deathrace, I can't remember if I've watched it or not. I think I may have seen pieces of like the original Deathrace here and there, because it's certainly in my mental image of what like those kind of movies are. But I don't know that I saw any of the new ones.
So I would highly recommend it. I would recommend. I'll get you the actual names of them. There was another one of like. There was a fourth one that I watched. It's on Netflix right now, and it was not up to the quality of the other three, and that's saying something. So, wow. Like it could almost be there, and it's got a star-studded cast in this fourth one. It's got Danny Trejo in it. It's got Danny Glover in it. Yeah. Wow. It's got a couple more people that I recognize in it. I can't remember their names off the top of my head right now, but yeah, the first three, and maybe it was because I wasn't paying attention to the first three that they were like better in my mind, because I was studying. I wasn't actually watching in it, but yeah, I do recommend the first three. I don't know if I can recommend the fourth. And then we did find out that there was yet another Deathrace movie that was done fairly recently by the original director of the original Deathrace. So I have to track that one down too. But yeah, so that's Sailing and Deathrace. So
what a combination.
Yep. Since it has been a while since we recorded, and we had the Philmont talk in between as well, Erin and I have actually gone sailing on Lake Erie with some friends of ours. They were kind enough to have us, come up and take them out on their boat, and then we would practice our sailing skills. What we actually practiced was seasickness skills. So Lake Erie is maybe about 50 feet deep. It is not a deep lake, especially fairly near shore. And the wind had just kicked up, and the waves were only about 3 feet, but they had a very short period, so they were very, very quick. And yeah, the boat going up and down or side to side. We had taken Dramamine before, and it hit Erin first, and then it hit me, and it was not a pleasant experience.
Yeah, there's this other high adventure thing for scouts called Sea Base, where you go down to the Florida Keys and you go out sailing for 2 weeks instead of going backpacking for 2 weeks. There's a reason why I went backpacking, because I don't like. There's people in our group who are like, "Oh, we should totally do Sea Base." Like, "Oh, you should totally do Sea Base," because I will be like, "Oh, you get used to it." Like, I don't know that I can.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things you can do to alleviate that. One of which is, one of the people that took us out, she would stay the night before on the boat. And
I see that.
And the rocking back and forth in the marina is not enough to get you seasick, but it is enough to acclimatize you to the motion. And it was just like, most of the seasickness is kind of like an inner ear thing.
Yes.
But like, I didn't feel nauseous per se. Normally when you'd feel seasickness and nausea, it feels kind of like how you feel when you have the flu and you need to purge some things. I could feel the blood pulling out of my hands, and and it was like I was very pale, and it was not what I would consider a normal seasickness feeling. I knew that's what it was, but it did not feel at all like motion sickness to me. It was much more intense. And I don't know if that was because of the Dramamine, or when I took the Dramamine, like it was suppressing the nausea, but not anything else.
Not the rest of it.
Right. But yeah, it was like my hands were almost going numb, sort of thing. And I was helming the boat at the time, so that was, I had to say, hey, like Erin was already going at that point, and I was like, I'm gonna need to let somebody else take over in a moment. And so I at least had the presence of mind to take my glasses off before I leaned over the boat. But yeah, both of us were there.
Everybody does tell me, and I think you told me this too, like, you do acclimate to it. Like, it is, you do truly get your sea legs, and it is one of those things, like, your inner ear just needs to adjust to it, and you just need that, like, couple of days to get your system to adjust. But I don't know that I want to spend those couple of days doing that. Unless I go to Florida first and go, like you say, like, you get on a boat and you just, like, acclimate for a couple of days before you actually, I'd much rather, I think, do altitude sickness again.
Yeah, I mean,
sickness again.
I think if we were, like, in Florida, or if the waves were calmer, we would have been fine. It was just the way that the waves were when, were kicked up by the wind on Lake Erie just were not good for us.
Yeah.
Our instructor for ASA, he's like, don't ever let anyone tell you that they don't get seasick. They just haven't gone sailing enough. Everybody gets seasick at some point. And yeah, you do. He did say you do get acclimatized to it, etc. But that's something that turns a lot of people off of sailing, is not giving it a chance, giving themselves a chance to acclimatize to it.
Right.
But it is if I hadn't known that would have been a very, very unpleasant experience. And, we would have been seriously reconsidering our life plan of buying a boat and living on it.
Right.
So
right.
It is something that we knew was going to happen. We just didn't expect it to happen this early.
Yeah. Wow. Well, more power to you, man.
Thanks. Yeah. So, for some reason, I got on a really big reading tear for a while, and so I've got a list of books. I won't go into depth on all of them, but I'll tell you if I recommend them or not and what they're basically about. My first one is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Has a lot of Firefly vibes, kind of a small ship, kind of a ragtag crew pulled from a bunch of different places. One of the main differences, though, is they're not all human. It's a sci-fi setting where there are aliens, and there are multiple different aliens. And the humans are actually not like the dominant race of beings that are out there. They've just more or less recently joined the intergalactic, governments and stuff that are out there. And it was good. It was mainly about the characters on that ship. There is a bigger plot, but it's just mainly there for, this is the reason why we're going from point A to point B, is for this plot piece. But really it's about the interaction of the different characters on board the ship. And it was enjoyable. It was kind of a nice casual read. And I think when I get into the mood of that sort of book again, I will pick up the second one. There's several out there. Our friend Natalie was the one who recommended that to me. So that will kind of tell you more or less, some of her interests or things that she posts on Twitter and such. So I think it fits pretty well with that. So then I read, these are probably not in order, Savage Legion and Savage Bounty by Matt Wallace. The Savage Bounty just came out a couple of weeks ago when we're recording this. I read the first one knowing that the second one was coming out. I enjoyed the first one enough that I immediately wanted to read the second one. The fantasy civilization that is the main, where most of the characters come from, is basically gobbles up other cities and other governments to kind of use their resources to keep their own city, their own government's civilization running. They don't seem to have the idea of a self-sustaining. It's constant expansion. There's some parallels to the modern day in some of these cases. There's also some parallels to I would say Avatar and Ba Sing Se with the "There is no war in Ba Sing Se" sort of portion of that. Most of the citizens of this civilization don't know. They know that barbarians are basically always at war with them, but they don't know that they're the aggressor. So like the higher ups in the government and such, they know what's going on, but they're keeping all that from their populace. It's good. It's interesting. And obviously things go wrong. So so it was good. I'm hoping the third one is comes out fairly quickly. Another one that I got, this was an audiobook that I got. It's a sci-fi novella, Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. It's the premise is basically a civilization is running out of a MacGuffin sort of thing, this organic substance, and they have to send a scout back to the ruins of Earth, which supposedly has some. And they send the scout back, and the scout discovers that the ruins of Earth isn't exactly as his civilization described it. And
nice, finds
some interesting things there. And I will warn anyone listening, it is, you could say that it is political, and it's my kind of politics. So yeah, I recommend it. It's really, really good. I haven't read anything or listened to anything by N.K. Jemisin that I haven't liked so far. So it was a pretty safe pickup for me. The next one is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, also known as Ursula Vernon. It's a young adult sort of fantasy novel that has a carnivorous sourdough starter as one of the side characters. Basically, it revolves around a young woman who has some minor magics to have her baked goods come to life. Like the gingerbread, depending upon what she puts into the gingerbread cookie mix, influences how active and how aggressive and etc. on the cookies that finally come out. And it's good. It's a fun one. I can't give away too much more without ruining some of the surprises that are in it. So, but I recommend it for sure.
Dare I say it sounds tasty?
It does. It does.
I'm sorry, guys. We're geek dads. Come on, you gotta do it occasionally, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of dad jokes lately flowing around on Twitter. In fact, I'll lead that into my next thing. We talked about Mad Max and Deathrace and Gaslands. I wrote it down here, but we've already talked about it. So my next one is actually Hades, which is a roguelike video game. And there's a lot of dad joke type things. I don't know if it's related to that, but running around on the internet today. So, for instance, I would tell you my joke about Icarus, but it just never lands. So,
nice.
Yeah. There's a whole slew of them, and I won't murder them. Yeah, Hades is good. It's a roguelike. You play Zagreus, who is the son of Hades and Persephone, who has just learned that he's the son of Persephone and not Nyx, which is who has basically been his mother all of his life. He didn't know Persephone was his actual mother. So he's trying to break out of Tartarus and Asphodel and the Elysium Fields and get back to the land of the mortals to find Persephone, who is his mother. So and meet her. And it's fun. You fight your way up, you die, you come back to the halls of Hades, and there are some things that you collect during each of your runs that you can then buy up and make more powerful, yourself more powerful, or the weapons that you carry more powerful. And then so you go a little bit more each time as well as you can. But being a roguelike, the order of things changes, and sometimes the creatures you're fighting slightly change. So some runs are easy and some runs are not so easy. So it's not a guarantee that you will always get further than you did the last run. So
nice.
Yeah. And then the last thing for me is still working on Dyson Fall. Haven't been able to play lately. So I've been trying to work on, I think the kids nowadays, quote unquote kids nowadays, are calling them oracles. But basically oracles are random tables or draws from a card deck or whatever, that allow you to randomize certain things. And so I'm working on oracles to help GMs or groups themselves to come up with interesting places to explore. So there's, like having a certain number of this is the type of location, this is the type of treasure you might find, this is the type of obstacles you might run into or creatures you might run into. So I've been noodling over that for a little while, and I'm still working a little bit on the community building side of things. I'm trying to make it fun and interesting to use, but I also don't want it to be a giant headache of keeping track of things. I want it to be fairly straightforward, but if I make it too simple, then it's almost like, what's the point of doing it? It's not very fun to do it.
Right.
I want it to be like a mini game in its own right. But I also don't want it to be so complex that people are like, why bother? Because it's too complex to keep track of. So I'm trying to find that balance.
Right. You don't want it to collapse. You don't want it to collapse under its own weight, right? And like have that kind of fun emergent complexity that gets people riffing on their ideas. Yes. And kind of building off one another without going, oh God, this is really boring. Why are we doing this?
Yes.
Right. So yeah, it's a fine balance, because I think we've both played games that have done both. So
Yep. I've even started thinking about, like, Zombies Run has a little mechanic where you go out and you pick up things like batteries and underwear and bottled water and stuff like that, and then you bring them back to your encampment. And the little mini game that's there that doesn't really do much in terms of Zombies Run, but is still fun, is you build your encampment, and different areas of the encampment do different things. So I'm like, do I want to go that route, or do I want a simple, you put points in and you get this ability, so there's a bunch of different stuff that I'm thinking about, and we'll need playtesting definitely before put it in the actual game. So
yeah, I think my Zombies Run town is actually built of like 50% sports bras.
Oh yeah,
I just get so many sports bras drops whenever I'm going out for a run. Like, I actually haven't used the town build all that much. I got in like, oh, I can do all these things, and then I kind of got distracted by just going off and doing the runs. But It's funny, like, he just kind of gets on this loop where it's like, you found another car battery or something, and you're just thinking, they're going, if this were the real world, how the heck would I be carrying all this stuff? But in any case, I get what you're saying. Like, it could be fun to, like, or a mix, right? Like, you seed it, and then other things add to it over time. But I think that's a cool idea. Like, I like the idea of the mini game that you do stuff with, and then it just kind of gets people riffing, right? Because I think some of the most fun I've had in my campaigns is when you got the group doing that and building out some part of it, and everybody was just tossing ideas into it, and it's fun to be able to riff.
Yeah, like, and I think that's where the oracles is going to go for, with the, like, creating something where you're exploring. If it is going to be more of a hex crawly type thing, where the oracles are basically kind of like the skeleton or a set of rumors that your characters have heard about for where you're going to go, and it gives the GM a skeleton to actually flesh out for the actual adventure. But everything in the rumors is true until the GM says, "Oh, wait, no, that's old information or that's false information," and then they can go in expecting one thing and then get another. So I think that's where that's going to end up going. I'm not sure about how the community building stuff is going to go, but yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool if the players could get in on that. I want it player driven, not GM driven for community.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. So what have you been doing since Philmont?
Well, a miracle happened while I was at Philmont. So I have a Nintendo Switch. I got it actually at the beginning of the pandemic. My family and we all got Animal Crossing, and then we hunkered down. And then somehow I broke my Switch in a unique way where I broke it, but only to like a certain extent. So the Joy-Motes. Joy-Cons.
Do they have
so
drift?
They snap onto the sides of the Switch. No, they wouldn't work when connected to the Switch, but would work when not connected to the Switch. Yes, exactly. Right.
So the sides of the Joy-Cons where they go in the rails, there are little lights that are, I think, like fiber optic, and they connect one to the other. And so that might be when they're on the Switch, there may be just some gunk in there. I don't know. Maybe that's just a guess. I've had to troubleshoot a lot of Switch stuff lately myself. So,
so it's just it stopped working. And I was using my Switch primarily as a handheld thing. Like I was almost never used it docked, and so this kind of killed my interest in the Switch because I just couldn't really use it with the Joy-Con connected anymore. It just wouldn't see it, right? So go to Philmont, go on vacation, come back home, power up the Switch. And I will note that I had actually sent it back to Nintendo for servicing, and they couldn't recreate the problem. Right? They sent it back to me saying, "Cannot recreate issue." Like, but it happens to me every time. So I come back. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll take one more run at this because I don't want to necessarily buy a new one. But also, there's the new like rev of the Switch coming out in the fall. Maybe I'll just get that, plug it in, turn it on, and it works. It's worked consistently ever since. So it has miraculously healed itself in the time. Like I just left it alone for a month, and now it's fine.
Okay, all right.
So this has led me to playing entirely too much Fire Emblem Three Houses. So I talked about that like a year ago. It might be only days ago, depending on when the episode actually posts. I think actually that one is actually out there, right? In Three Houses, it's like this Japanese style role-playing game where you're managing squad-based combat, and then you have all this role-playing off to the side. And I just occasionally get completely addicted to Fire Emblem and lose all track of time. And I have done it again with Fire Emblem. So it's now that I've got it up and running again. Like I haven't fired up my PS4 in a long time because my computer my television only has enough HDMI ports to connect to two devices, which is something I didn't realize when I bought it. So you can only have one connected at a time, and it's just been the Switch. So I'm very glad that my Switch is back, and I don't have to buy a new one, so that's good.
That's very good. Yep.
Yes. I have also done a heck of a lot of summer reading. So my summer reading list, which we talked about one of our podcasts that is actually out. My overall list had 13 books on it, and I added 2 additional books to it, and then I lost one. So the books I added were Alien Bug Hunt, which is a collection of short stories involving colonial marines dealing with various alien, but not capital A alien threats, and included a story by Scott Sigler, who wrote Alien Phalanx, which is what got me turned on to the series, this collection in the first place. And I think that it takes its name from the fact, like when you're watching Aliens, they talk about whether it's going to be a stand-up fight or another bug hunt. Right. And that alludes to the fact that the colonial marines are going up against weird stuff enough that they have a term for it.
Right.
Like there are enough bug hunts in addition to their regular peacekeeping and, suppression and whatever else other missions they're on, that they occasionally go up against weird, xenomorphs that are not our favorite xenomorph, he with the they of the multiple jaws and what have you, and which we call it face huggers. And so this is a collection of books of short stories that revolve around them on those kinds of missions. There's some that are kind of like tangential or tangential to what happened in the movie Aliens. So like little side stories here and there. You get to find out what happened to Burke. If you remember, Carter Burke kind of goes off on his own, gets attacked by an alien. But what happened next? And so it's a very good. There's one story which is actually Scott Sigler's story where it's told from the perspective of the aliens going into the terraforming base that we see in the movie Alien. So that was, it's very well done.
That's cool.
I enjoyed it. I think it's one of these things, right? Like you have to love aliens. And if you love aliens and you love colonial marines, then this is the book for you. If you do not love aliens and you do not love colonial marines, this probably not the book for you.
I actually watched the beginning of Aliens again recently. And, it came out quite a while ago, pre or very early on. When did it come out?
1986.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely pre my entering the workforce. Now that I've entered the workforce and lived through some pretty cruddy managers and other sales type people and things like that, that scene where he's convincing Ripley to join up and be like, well, you could stay and just continue to be a loader, that sort of, it's like just looking down on her. There's nothing wrong with that. With subtext, there's everything wrong with that subtext. It's like, man, I hate Burke even more than I did in 1986. Like, he was a douche back then, but he is, oh my gosh, so bad.
He's such a weasel. Such a weasel. And
you just see it.
If you want to see him, yes. Yeah, so if you want to experience him getting his just desserts, pick up Alien Bug Hunt.
Okay.
So I also picked up Children of Ruin, which was the follow-up to Children of Time by Adrian...
Tchaikovsky?
I'm going to massacre his last name. Tchaikovsky, thank you. I always massacre his last name, which is terrible because he writes great books. Damn, my lack of phonetic
I'm trying to remember if
spelling.
We've talked about this before or if this was one that you and I just talked with, but not on the podcast.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know we went on a whole riff about how I can't pronounce things.
Yes.
Because I skipped over. I didn't think I'd ever have to know anything about phonics when I grew up. It turns out, for kids, as we've said in previous times, phonics is important and it does actually help you pronounce things. But that's not the point of this particular piece. These are two really fantastic books. So Children of Time is actually a book about uplifting of an alien civilization. So Earth is in its last days. It's all going to crap. We send out a bunch of generational ships and this project, which the intent of the project was when they got to this planet, they were going to seed it with monkeys. And then they were going to infect the monkeys with an uplift virus. And then over time, this would give rise to an intelligent civilization that would want to be our friends. That was the plan. It is not a tremendous of a spoiler to say that things do not go according to plan.
It doesn't sound like a good plan.
The monkeys die, but the virus doesn't. And so the virus lands on this planet, and there are arachnids on the planet. And so the virus was basically programmed to seek out something to uplift. It couldn't find monkeys, so it took spiders. So if you have a thing about spiders, I don't recommend reading this book because there are a lot of spiders. But it's really good in terms of it does, because it's all Children of Time because it's told over this massive scale. And so you see the evolution of this spider civilization, and he just does a fantastic job with it. It's really, really impressive. And meanwhile, off to the side, there's this human generational starship that comes to this planet, basically gets chased off, tries to go off and colonize somewhere else. And it's the dealing of the humans and the spiders eventually kind of have to figure out how to deal with one another. And it's just a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. And so I immediately went out and got Children of Ruin, which does more of the same, but with octopuses.
Okay. So humans doing the thing that humans do, which is sometimes, which is not really think through the consequences of their actions before they do something.
Yes. Yes, and then what are the wonders and horrors that evolve from all of the unintended consequences of those kinds of interventions? And it's very good. I think it's the most, like, I love David Brin's Uplift series, and so this is like getting in on the ground floor of Uplift, where you just get to see these civilizations come into being, and he does a fantastic job with it. Like, I loved Isaac Asimov's Foundation series because it's a similar sort of like grand time scope where, you know, you get to see how civilization evolves, and that's just really nifty. So I really enjoyed that book. Cool. and its sequel, so I recommend picking him up. I did lose one book off my list, which was Inhibitor Phase by Aleister Reynolds. This is the new Revelation space novel. It was supposed to come out July 27th. I went out to go read it because it was going to be the next book that I was going to pull from my list, and only to find that it's coming out on October 12th. Of 2021. So I don't know what the backstory is there. Presumably, you know, baby COVID, who knows? Yeah. But in any case, it's not coming out until October, which was a bit of a disappointment because I had my heart set on reading this book, and now I'm like, oh, darn.
Yep. So
next
summer reading list or winter reading list.
Yeah, potentially. It might come up on the winter break reading list. I don't know. I do love the Revelation space novels, and it would be a nice little gift to get in the middle of Christmas. Like, just, you know, ask my parents for that, and then, you know, you can get it for my birthday or something and read it over Christmas break. So I have entered a new phase. I don't know if you've entered this phase where it used to be I would buy stuff, a new Switch, new computer, or whatever, and when I would buy my stuff, my old tech would become my kids' new stuff, right? So when my daughter was 4, she would play on my Nintendo DS. I upgraded to the next DS. She got my old DS, right? Well, we have now come full circle because I bought my daughter a new computer for college, so I get her old Surface Pro.
Nice.
I needed a Microsoft computer to be able to do Microsoft-y things because I'm typically a Mac guy. And the Surface Pro is about 4 years old, but this is the key thing. It can run Campaign Cartographer. So I can finally use the humble bundle for Campaign Cartographer that I got. That has all these great resources, maps, icons, tokens, and stuff that you can use for your online game. But I didn't have anything that could actually run it. So now I have something that can run it.
Yeah, let me know how that goes, because it's like really like... It is based on CAD software, which I know how to do. Yes. But I have not done in many a year, at least 18, because that's how old my daughter is. So, you know, I had the same. I picked up the same humble bundle, and they're like, here is the all exclusive guide, is like 500 pages long. And I'm like, when am I going to find the time to even read a portion of that to get into this thing?
So I have a plan. And so my plan when I got the Humble Bundle was actually to not actually relearn Campaign Cartographer, because I actually learned it. I used to use CC2, the Campaign Cartographer 2, way back in the day. I did all my Greyhawk maps in that. And then I learned CC3, which was a significant upgrade. And then I did CC3 Pro, which is an even better upgrade, and so it's become more intuitive over time. But to your point, it is fundamentally a CAD program, and if you have no experience with CAD, it's a steep learning curve. It's just a very steep learning curve. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to take all of the assets and use them, because I know enough about Campaign Cartographer to load up all the resources, do the export, and then just be able to use it. So I'm planning on using it as a platform for art resources for my online games, and less as a to actually go out and map my campaign, because I don't have enough time for that. Just like you don't have enough time for that.
Right. Well, I mean, if you can export them, I am much more familiar with, and my skills are not nearly as rusty with Photoshop as with a CAD program that I've never used before. I know that there will be, like, if I just want to put out a pretty map, I can use Photoshop with those things. If I wanted something where I could zoom in and out and you know, be able to measure the exact distance and other things like that, you know, Campaign Cartographer is definitely the thing for that. I know that there's some tools in there that do some randomization and other things like that, you know, like laying down groves of trees and things like that would be a lot easier in Campaign Cartographer if I figured out how to do it. But Yeah, maybe just pulling the assets out and making stuff in Photoshop would be easier for me.
Yeah, so that's my plan. I mean, there's a amazing collection of maps and other things. So hopefully that'll work. I think I can get it exported into a standard format that I can then use elsewhere. But we'll see. Now I have the computer to play with it on. Cool. Talking about like playing with stuff. So you mentioned this briefly before, but I want to come back to it, which is Gaslands Refueled, which looks hella gonzo, bonkers, awesome. This thing, so we talked about it before, but I don't know that we actually got into what it was.
Right.
Which is post-apocalyptic Matchbox cars.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
So you've played it. Why don't you describe it? Because I got the book because you mentioned it in passing in our last podcast. My friend from my local gaming group, we're getting together to see off one of our friends. We're talking about playing some BattleTech, and he's like, "Oh, and I got this new thing called Gaslands. Looks really cool. I've been playing with my kids. I have all this stuff that I just ordered for it. We should play that too." And I'm like, okay, well now two people whose opinions I trust have mentioned this game. Maybe I should go learn more about it.
Yeah. So I knew that I was going to be going on a trip with some friends, and before that we did the ASA 101 stuff, and I watched 3 movies of Deathrace, and I had picked up Gaslands before then, and I thought, this is pretty cool. I used to play BattleTech back in the day. I like blowing stuff up, Mad Max, etc. And so I picked it up, and then after the 3 Deathrace movies, I'm like, all right, people, do you guys want to play a game of Gaslands while we're all together? And they're like, sure, no worries. We'll play one game. And so I printed out some, the 3D printing community has put out models for like containers, like shipping containers, rams to glue on your Matchbox cars, and guns to glue on your Matchbox cars, etc. And also the movement templates for Gaslands itself. So, given the fact that my newer printer actually works fairly well compared to my last one, I printed out all the templates and I printed out some of those containers, and happened to have been going through. Actually, it was during our ASA sailing thing. We went to the grocery store to pick up some stuff, and in one of the aisles was just a big Matchbox display, $1 a car. So I picked up 8 of them, and so I took all that to the vacation. And and I read the book, no one else had the book. They knew of it, and so since I had read the rules, I just moderated. And so we actually had 4 players, and we ended up playing twice, 2 different days. The first day we did an actual race. So everybody starts at the starting line, and we had this big 6-foot long table, and we put some stuff down, and the race was on. And it took about an hour and a half. Which, if you've played BattleTech before, that is an extremely fast game compared to BattleTech. BattleTech can be really slow.
Unless you're me, in which case you get taken out in the first round because, somebody hit you with a trebuchet in the head and your mech got destroyed.
Right.
I'm not bitter.
Right. No, I've been there. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go do something else, guys. Yeah, like I'm used to in BattleTech doing like lance on lances, two full lances, and just a lance per person, and having more than 2 people playing. Even with 2 people playing, that's 8 mechs that you have to deal with. There's some streamlining. I think that if I went back to it today, that I might be able to get stuff a little more streamlined. I don't know if the newer versions did do streamlining, but I haven't played recently. But Gaslands it's kind of a spiritual successor to Car Wars. I think the next time we get together, one of my friends who was playing, he kickstarted the new edition of Car Wars. So we're going to play that, and we can do some comparison and contrasting.
Okay.
But the basics of it are you start out in gear phase 1, and everyone starts out in first gear, and whoever has pole position or the first player position, they can roll up to their full handling dice, and if they get there's different results you can get, most of which are good, some of which are you're slightly losing control, but you can also use that to position yourself. So like if you roll a slide, you can actually use that to drift around obstacles and such. But you're still slightly out of control, so you take some hazard tokens. And if during your turn or anyone else's turn you have 6 or more hazard tokens on your car, you have to roll to see if you've wrecked. Or gotten into a crash, sort of thing.
Nice.
And like I said, it's really fun. Let me go back for a second. You start out in first gear phase. In second gear phase, everyone who is who has their car in gear 2 or higher also gets to go. And then it goes to third gear phase. If you have gone to third gear or higher, you then get to go. So it goes up to 6th gear. And if you if you're going in 6th gear, you're going really, really, really fast. And the higher the gear you're in, whatever gear you're in determines which templates you can use. When you're in first or second gear, you have some shorter templates, you have some tighter turns, things like that, but you don't have access to the really long or fast stuff. When you're in 6th gear, you have access to the long and fast stuff with 6 to 8 inch long straight template stuff, but you don't have access to a lot of turning.
Which could be problematic.
So you kind of have to balance, do I go more often or do I play it safe and go a little less often? And so like in the race, I gave everybody it was the starter suggestion out of the book. Everybody got a buggy and a car. So they had 2 vehicles, and they kind of did some stuff there. They had 2 things to play with. So if one was going super fast, but they didn't want the other one to go super fast and kind of play it safe with the other one, they could do that.
Right.
So that was also the game where we learned that maybe you do want to shift up in gear to keep going, because everyone started in first. And we had one person who didn't really grok that initially, and so went up to like second gear, but then the rest, like a lot other people got up to like 5th gear. So she was kind of like, okay, well, both my cars are like in second and I'm not doing anything. And then, but eventually it came around, and then so she was, she got the hang of it right away. She ended up almost winning, by the way. So nice. Just because she started off slow did not mean that she was not in the race. In fact, she, except for a set of exceptional die rolls at the end and some good positioning, the person who won almost didn't finish the race, but ended up shooting across the finish line just before she did. Nice. But everybody had such fun with it that the majority of the people in that game wanted to play another game. And so basically nice. I set up just kind of I each gave them just one car this time. We set it up on a little tiny oval table and put some stuff in there. And we kind of randomly rolled. I picked the situation, but the situation was basically like a death match. And the thing that made it more interesting for the audience, because if you do certain things, you can get audience votes, which allow you to do cool stuff with your car.
Oh, nice. And
so like remove a die 6 of hazard tokens off your car by spending some audience votes. So if you're like just about to wipe out, you can then roll a die 6. Hopefully you get a high number. You wipe out a bunch of those hazard tokens, and then you can keep going gonzo crazy. But to make it more interesting for the fictional audience, there were 3 turrets, machine gun turrets, on the table, and whoever ended up getting within a certain radius of that turret during their movement phase, the first time during the movement phase of that gear phase, it would fire on them. So we had a lot of people being shot at by the automated turrets. We then had several of the cars ram the turrets and run them over. We had a lot. We figured out. We worked out the wipeout rules really well in that game. You know, there are multiple times in both games there were people who wiped out, and one of the things you do in the wipeout step is you make a flip check. And you roll, and I'm trying to remember it, I think if you roll above your gear, you're okay. But if you roll under your gear, you flip. And I don't mean like you roll. I mean you if you've seen Fast and Furious, I'm sure that stuff like that's happened. But like the typical car race movie ending where they hit something and the car flies up into the air and lengthwise tumbles end over end through the air and then lands, usually blowing up. That is the flip check. And you have the flip check. The flip check ignores all terrain in the distance that it is flipping, but then it lands. And we had multiple times where the flipping car landed onto another car, which caused a collision, which caused that car to wipe out. And then after the wipeout step, if you have no body points left on your car, you then roll to see if your car explodes. And then if your car explodes and there's another car within a radius of that car takes damage, which could wipe that car out. The chain reactions are amazing in this game.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a pretty fast-moving game, which I think is the thing. The one time I played Car Wars,
it lasted like all day, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah. It was grueling to play Car Wars. Like we were all super excited, and then we kind of wandered away.
Yeah, I mean, Car Wars is a product of its age. I'm sure that there are ways to speed it up nowadays, or maybe you already are in there. But like Car Wars was born out of wargaming and Starfleet Battles era type stuff, where you spent hours and hours and hours creating stuff and then had to play it over the course of a whole day or 2 days, you know?
Right, because, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, the way that things are in Gaslands, I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but they made a really fun game that feels like a car movie, like a Mad Max or a Deathrace movie. And you know that they specifically took inspiration from both of these things because and from the Sunday sort of things, because, and I'll tell you why. There are in Gaslands Reloaded, Gaslands Reloaded is the newer version, but really they had Gaslands and then a couple of supplemental PDFs that came out. And Gaslands Reloaded has all those PDFs included in there. One of which is a war rig as your kind of base of operations, and you can play it as a campaign. And so you have a war rig and a bunch of vehicles, and you go out on the wastelands. Then there's a Deathrace thing, which has literal... the first Deathrace movie that we watched had literal power-up pads that cars would drive over that would activate their weapons. And they have a game mode where that happens. You have to drive over the sword circle and it will activate your weapons. And then when you drive over the shield power up, it activates some of your defenses like smoke screens or mines or things like that. So those two things definitely inspirations. The monster truck rally stuff. There is another
of course
game mode called Truckosaurus, which has a little dinosaur made out of cars that shoots flames out of its mouth, can pick up cars and eat them, and has a wrecking ball as its tail. And basically all the cars go into this giant arena, and on certain phases, your opponent, say you have like 5 or 6 people, like the person to your right or left will then take control of Truckosaurus's movement at the moment and can face it in any direction it wants, and then activate its weapons. And then, as more phases go on, you'll have a chance to activate Truckosaurus, and your other opponents will have a chance to activate Truckosaurus. Truckosaurus has infinite ammo and really can't be killed. You're basically trying to get as much audience votes as you can, and also to eliminate your competition. Because as far as I can tell, Truckosaurus can't be destroyed.
Wow, that's fantastic. You see, as a kid, I loved... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a wealth of stuff that like you and I grew up on that has influenced this game.
Yeah, so I can remember when I was a little kid, like 5, 6, 7 or whatever, I loved Matchbox cars, and I would just spend like a Saturday playing by myself, setting up the massive car race throughout my entire house, jumping them down the stairs, making up these rules in my head about who survived and who didn't when they cleared the landing and what have you, right? And so I could just like spend all this time destroying my model cars, and then do it all again like 2 weeks later. And so that like a little bit of me is still that like 7-year-old who just loves to play with his Matchbox cars. And although my son went through a Matchbox car phase, he did not do like the demolition derby style stuff that I did with my Matchbox cars. He was much better with his cars, and he just never got into kind of like the I guess role playing with cars, like just. And my friends and I would take our Matchbox cars and we would ram them together. Like we would set up like, the track, right? And then you would set up through the whole house. We would unleash them just so that they could crash into one another, right?
Yep.
So I love that part of it. And I love the idea that somebody made a game that's basically doing this. I love the modding aspect to it, right? Like the 3D printing stuff that you were talking about, but also like I just Googled real quick how people are modding their Matchbox cars. That's fantastic. And I just happened the other day to open up this locker we have outside where we kept all the kids' toys and what have you. It's like their outdoor toys. And I found there's like a bucket that is full of rusty Matchbox cars. I'm like,
those are perfect.
Okay, I know what I'm using on Saturday. Yeah. Right? Like, cool. This is great. I can't wait.
They have a whole bunch of different classes of car. So like they have a buggy and they have a car. Those are kind of your basics. But you can have like a school bus, you can have a war rig, you can have motorcycles, you can have performance cars, basically anything you can buy in a Matchbox line or find in a in a bucket, for outdoor toys. You can probably find that in the Gaslands, and they'll have stats for it that you can do. And you don't really have to create the car. You can get that deep into it. There's charts of like, you can point by your car, but once you do that, I think the game would still run just as fast as it is when I said, okay, here's your car, here's the handling, you have 2 crew, and you have a forward mounted machine gun, and with the rules you can fight. Each crew can fire a weapon. So if there's nobody in your forward mounted firing area, your crew can fire 360 out the windows with their submachine guns, basically their pistols or whatever they have inside. But if there is somebody in front, one crew can fire that, and then the other crew can fire their pistol. And that's what we did for both games, and it was hugely fun. But I can see in the future, if when you want to add more complexity to the game, you can, arm your cars with missile launchers or Gatling guns or the experimental lasers, or whatever. You can soup up your performance car with the experimental fusion engine, etc. There's a lot to it that I haven't mentioned. Like, there is a setting that is part of it. But you obviously don't need the setting to still have fun with the game. And that's really awesome. And then you can have more fun if you want to get into the setting, which is like different corporate sponsored racing death race teams. And each of those corporate sponsors have access to different types of equipment and such to build their vehicles with.
Wow. Yeah. It strikes me as a great con game. I think one of the things I loved about going to Gen Con and Origins, particularly in the Savage Worlds community, is people would build out these great like diorama like terrain for you to play with, and I could just totally see this taking like if I enjoy it as much as I think I might, like that would be cool. Like once cons come back after the pandemic, and like being able to actually go and just like, hey guys, I got Matchbox cars. Oh, and I 3D printed and painted up some terrain. Do you want to play? Right? And like you get that nice crowd that gathers around and people are cheering it on. Like that was always a great feeling at Gen Con, and I could see this game doing that.
Yeah, you can totally go whole hog with the terrain and everything like that. Like for our race, we had books on the table and a water bottle and some markers and then the random 3D printed stuff that I had brought. So like you don't need a lot of stuff. But I didn't even paint the cars. They were just straight out of the package when we played. But as time progresses, I'm gonna add some, paint those cars up. There's a bunch of people on YouTube that have put out stuff about how they've modded their cars. They'll actually drill out the rivets that hold the bottom of the car to the top of the car. They'll take it apart. They'll take out the windshield. They'll prime it. They'll paint it. They'll add bits on. They'll put it all back together. It's pretty crazy what they're doing.
Wow.
They end up with some beautiful, beautiful stuff that I would love to see at a con table. You're 100% right there. Yeah, and I would love to be able to do that.
Right. So to start, I think Rusty